Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. A new batch of sanctions against Russia one day after a referendum in Crimea that much of the world is calling a fraud. Crimeans voted by more than 90% to leave Ukraine and join the Russian Federation. Crimea is overwhelmingly Russian, so the outcome was a foregone conclusion. The Ukrainian government calls the vote illegal, and U.S. President Barack Obama issued new sanctions against key Russian officials.
As an initial step, I'm authorizing sanctions on Russian officials, entities operating in the arms sector in Russia, and individuals who provide material support to senior officials of the Russian government. And if Russia continues to interfere in Ukraine, we stand ready to impose further sanctions.
The sanctions were issued against 11 Russian and Ukrainian officials blamed for Russia's military action in Crimea. Ivan Eland is the director at the Independent Institute Center on Peace and Liberty. He has been with us many times on this subject. Ivan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the president issued 11 sanctions against 11 individuals. Sort of these are basically nastyograms. I mean, I'm sort of underwhelmed by these sanctions. Is that an accurate description?
Oh, yes, I think so. It's mainly symbolic. Sanctions are often a way to show that you're doing something stronger than a diplomatic slap on the wrist, and that you're doing something less than, going to war with a country that has nuclear weapons. So they very carefully calibrated these to be not too strong. So if Russia does something like, for instance, go into eastern Ukraine or annex Crimea, that they can ratchet it up the sanctions. So they're visa bans, asset bans, but they didn't even do the top Kremlin leadership. They did,
sort of mid-level guys,
but not critical people.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Do you think that some of the harsher economic sanctions are being held up because the EU is maybe balking?
Well, I think so, yes. The problem with economic sanctions is, unlike military action, it's not a zero-sum game. When people invest and trade with each other, both parties benefit. And, of course, EU exports a lot to Russia, and they have a lot of investments there. And, of course, they benefit from those, so they don't want to cut that off. The U.S. has a lot less trade and interaction with Russia, although it does have some. So, of course, the Europeans have a bigger stake in the game, and so they don't want to
they buy a lot. They buy a lot from Russia, including natural gas. So the question then is, Russia sort of betting that at the end of the day, the economic reality of the situation is going to win out over the political unease that we in the West maybe have about them going into another country.
Right. I think that's exactly true. As you mentioned, they have oil and gas exports to Europe, and Europe is always nervous about those. They could shift the supplies around there, but nonetheless, commerce is commerce, and people don't want to disrupt that. And usually that's a good thing because you have a peace lobby in both countries. And I think there probably isn't enough peace lobby between Russia and the United States at this point. There's more than it was during the Soviet Union, but there's still not as much trade as Europe has with Russia.
You have said that the United States should not care as much as it seems to here. Is the problem that we've sort of now gotten ourselves into is that we're talking big and carrying at the end of the day a very small stick because we've done this before, but now we've sort of put ourselves in a box. Where are we going to go?
Yeah, I think Obama is careful in foreign policy, but sometimes his rhetoric exceeds what he can do, like in the Syrian red line with the chemical weapons attack. And also, I think this is probably, he's a little bit more calibrated in this. I think he learned a bit of a lesson, but still, this is not really strategic to the United States. People think it is, but, we've pushed NATO east, and Russia needs buffer states, and they're losing a buffer state. Actually, the Russians are operating from a position of weakness here. They're just trying to salvage what they can of Ukraine, the Russian-speaking areas.
They're sort of
Crimea, maybe eastern Ukraine, we don't know. But they're still trying to salvage, because they had a friendly government in Ukraine, and that's not anymore.
And let me ask you this. What are they getting out of taking Crimea other than land? Because it's not like they're getting a robust economy that's going to help the Russian economy. In fact, it's going to be just the opposite.
Well, I think that's true. And I think if Putin had been really smart, he just would have waited for a Russian-friendly leader to take power again, because the Ukrainian economy is such a mess that this government will probably fall eventually, too. So, but I think Crimea, there's a naval base there. They already had ships and forces there. But I think that cements that. And also, it's sort of a way for Putin to say, well, okay, we lost Ukraine, but we're still a presence in Ukraine, and this is a Russian-speaking area. He knew that they would vote to, it doesn't matter that the people say whether there's troops, it's not a fair referendum, and that's probably technically true, but does anybody really doubt that the Russian speakers in Crimea would have voted to go with Russia? Probably not. I mean, so this is a way for him to say, well, I'm still a player in Ukraine, and we have interests in there, so watch out. And Crimea has always been part of Russia traditionally up until 1954 when Khrushchev yanked it away and gave it to Ukraine. So I think, there's some nationalistic irrationality there for the whole thing as well.
But let me ask you this. Senator John McCain, Arizona senator, says that Russia is a gas station, rather, masquerading as a corporation. And I think what he's trying to say is that this is a corporate-driven country now. Vladimir Putin does not seem to care right now, though, about the economic impact in Russia.
Well, I think, like I say, I think the nationalism and this idea of reclaiming Crimea, you forget that Putin has gained. He was elected in the first place, and his whole career has been, let's push back at the West. They pushed NATO so far east, and they just tromped over Boris Yeltsin. And I'm going to be a nationalist, and I'm going to do this. So sometimes people do things that are economically irrational simply to get political points at home. And the Russian people like when he does these things.
His popularity is up.
And, it only fortifies his position in Russia, which is his principal goal, I think.
All right. Ivan Eland from the Independent Institute. Thank you, as always.